it hurts me, it pains me. I'm a father, and and I see similarities between, in general, just having children, and that could be one of us or one of our kids or my own. So
the two largest communities or denominations within Judaism are Sephardim and Ashkenazim.
In America, if someone is picturing a Jew, it's almost always an Ashkenazi one. And that's because of the roughly 7 million Jews in America, only about 500,000 aren't Ashkenazi. But that's not true across the world. In Israel, the majority of Jews are not Ashkenazi. A quick review of who these two groups are. Ashkenazi Jews originally came from Germany, France, and Eastern Europe, while Sephardic Jews originally came from Portugal and Spain, and later lived in all of these places. Notably, there's a lot of overlap in who lived where, and not all Jews neatly fit into these two categories, not by a long shot. Mizrahi Jews, for instance, are largely from the Middle East, and they share many customs with the Sephardic Jews. So much so that in Israel, many think of them as one group. And then there are Ethiopian Jews, Italkim, and many others.
Ashkenazim, or Ashkenazi Jews, are those whose ancestors arrived in the Danube Valley and Rhineland areas after the Roman exile, with some accounts dating as far back as 321 CE. In the 8th century, the Khazar ruling class converted en masse to Judaism on the instruction of their ruler. According to this line of reasoning, these Jews didn't migrate from Jerusalem and Babylonia into France and Germany, but rather migrated from modern Russia and Ukraine.
For the righteous, they exist in the world to come and they're rewarded. And for those whose major complexion is black are excluded from the world to come. Major complexion is black are excluded from the world to come. Major complexion is black are excluded from the world to come. For the righteous, they exist in the world to come and they're rewarded. And for those whose major complexion is black are excluded from the world to come.
Today, it is prohibited, and you can Google this, to do a DNA test in Israel. Totally forbidden. Wrong. It's illegal. It's a crime. You'll be jailed if you do a DNA test in Israel. Why? Because they know the truth will come out. You come from Poland, you come from Ukraine, you came from Europe, you came from everywhere else, and they were the original Middle Eastern Jews who lived together with the Muslims and the Christians for centuries. For centuries. So what happened to a lot of the Jews?
Want to fully understand your family genealogy? Not without a court order. And this is Jerusalem Post. This is their publication. Want to fully understand your family genealogy? Not without a court order. According to some ancestry websites, there are indicators to tell you if you possess Jewish DNA or not. If you live in Israel and want to find out where your family comes from, what do? One thing is for certain, any ancestry kit from the local pharmacy is out of the question, according to Yediot Aharonot report. While millions of such kits have been sold in the United States, Israelis are forbidden to buy ancestry DNA kits from the store without presenting a court order, as the Israeli government controls these types of purchases due to the genetic information law.
I'm about to show you something extremely controversial. It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it and or talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now, I bet you thought it was going to be a lot crazier than that, right? Now, you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel.
I want to start off by stating that not a single Negro or African group was included in any of their testing. And when I say their testing, I am referring to the Israeli geneticists. They were very selective of the Eurasian, in other words, Europe-Asian people groups they chose in an attempt to manipulate their expected outcome. Now, this is coming from an article titled Out of Khazaria, Evidence for Jewish Genome Lacking. This is coming from Aaron Elhaik, an Ashkenazi Jewish geneticist. It reads, Aaron Elhaik, a geneticist at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, thinks so. In a recently published study in Genome Biology Evolution, he is calling for a rewrite of commonly held assumptions about Jewish ancestry. Instead of being primarily the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel, present-day Jewish populations are, finds Elhaik, primarily the children of a Turkish people who lived in what now is Russia, north of Georgia, east of Ukraine. This civilization, the Khazars, converted from tribal religions to Judaism between the 7th and 9th centuries. The controversy cut into Elhaik's works runs deep. Far past the lab bench, among some circles, his conclusions are bound to be unpopular. This is the first scientific paper to prove the Khazarian hypothesis and reject the Rhineland hypothesis, he says, and with it about 40 years of research. Although his findings will not be welcome in all circles, Elhaik's interest is more medical than political. All I want is to help my colleagues who are studying genetic disorder, he says. I hope this work will open up a new era in genetic studies where population stratification will be used more. Let's highlight another point of this article. Previous studies had, for example, combined the question of similarity among and between Jewish populations and the question of ancestry and relatedness to non-Jewish populations. Elhaik viewed these questions separately. Jewish communities are less homogeneous than is popularly thought, he says, with Jewish communities along the former Khazarian border showing the most heterogeneity. His second question centered on ancestry. When comparing Jewish communities to their non-Jewish neighbors, Caucasus or Levant, in other words, Middle Eastern populations, which is the closest to Jews. All Eurasian Jewish communities are closer to Caucasus populations, he writes, with Central European Jews closer to Italian non-Jews as the exception. Not one of the 8 evaluated Jewish populations were closer to Levant populations. Let me read that again. Not one of the 8 evaluated Jewish populations were closer to Levant populations. So I want to say this again. Not a single Negro or African group was included in any of their testing. And again, when I say their testing, I am referring to the Israeli geneticists. They were very selective of the Eurasian people groups they chose in an attempt to manipulate or control or dictate their expected output.
Here's another line of bullshit that I've seen banging around the crankiest parts of the internet, or the most anti-Semitic parts of the internet, saying that no, Ashkenazi Jews, they're not Jews. They are genetically derived from a nation that was formed sometime in, I think it's 700 or 800 AD in kind of the central part of what is today Russia. Show me the science. Show me the proof. If you can't, then just go away. But I understand you won't. I know you won't, because nobody ever does. All they do is say, I saw it on the internet, it's got to be true. But, okay, show me.
First, let me, when you see Ashkenazi Jews sharing high similarity to Romanians and Hungarians, this is because both of these populations were offshoots of the Khazars. They were both founded by these members of the Caucasus who ruled this area of north of the Black Sea, where we have South Russia nowadays, between the 7th and 13th centuries. a very powerful empire. They converted to Judaism in the 8th century, and they sent offshoots to Eastern Europe. And we still some Ashkenazi Jews are mapped to this region of Ukraine. They're not all mapped to Ashkenaz. Most of them are, but some of them are mapped to Ukraine, and we can see very nicely some kind of migration route using GPS.
In an interview that Benaya Israel and myself did with Ashkenazi Jewish geneticist Aaron Elhig, I asked him to explain genetic distances. Now, before I play that clip of him explaining and answering my question, I want to just give you a little understanding about genetic distances. This is coming from a book titled The Origin of Ashkenazi Jewry. And I want to encourage you guys, if you want to get kind of like a crash course on the history of the Ashkenazi Jewish community, I encourage you guys to purchase this book. So again, the book is titled The Origin of Ashkenazi Jewry. Now we're going to focus on genetic distances. It reads, a large part of the study was devoted to the determination of genetic distances between the different populations. Through this method, genetic markers from different Jewish populations are compared. The smaller the relationship, the more differences in DNA may have arisen. Such differences are called distances. 75 Caucasian, in other words, white populations based on 9 markers. The genetic distance analysis showed that East European Jews were closest to the inhabitants of Thrace, the region shared by Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. Bulgarian Jews came next, followed by 36 non-Jewish populations, and only then the second Jewish population, the Iranian Jews. Other results showed a large Italian component in the gene pool. In other words, total variety of genes in a population. Of the East European Jews, from all these results, it appears genetically the different Jewish communities do not have much in common. Often, they appear to be more related to the population in the midst of which they live. In other words, when its genetic material was available.
The second question you asked was genetic drift. Genetic drift is when we have these mutations that are by chance, that are random, and they accumulate over time. Now, the more time passes, the more of these mutations accumulate. And if a tribe moves from one place to another, 2 things can happen. They can maintain marriage within that tribe, in which case they will preserve the original signature of the first tribe that they left, and allows us to make connection between these 2. The second thing, they can start mixing with the local environment, like almost always happens, and then they will for a while show a mixed signature, and then depends on the level of mixture, they will start moving toward the hosting tribe. But if we're looking at the first strategy, if they maintain marriage within the tribe, over very, very long time, they will not be identical to the original tribe anymore because of this accumulation of random mutations that only happen in this tribe, but not in the original tribe. It happened in the original tribe too, but different random process. So they're not going to be identical. And over time, they're just going to be split. Now, the extension of these splits depends on how much time has passed. And that's genetic drift. Now, in the populations that we're talking about, Ashkenazi Jews, that we're looking at 1,000 years, that's not enough time for random drift to create completely separate things. However, you mentioned it, and that's very good because it's a chance to refute another myth. Random drift has been used to explain why Ashkenazi Jews are different. When you compare them to the Palestinians, they don't look like Palestinians. When you compare them to English, they don't look like English. So they said, oh yeah, they because they married each other, random drift took its shot and created this unicorn. That's not true. They're just not being compared to the right populations where they came out. If you compare them to the population we mentioned, these Southern Europeans, Turkish populations, you will see much higher similarity. Genetic drift does not act so quickly.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when I did some research on it, it was according to the numbers and basically that formula that was laid out, it can take anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 years for that, I guess, whatever that mutation to become a permanent marker. So yeah, you answered the question, and the other question was about the Kohanim, because that for me didn't really make sense. If all the sons share the same father, how can one son, why mutation be different, especially from the other brothers? So I just had a question on that as well.
Exactly. First, if I may say, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You're on top of the fields, and I take great pleasure in discussing with you and answering your questions. Let's say that you're on the beach and you see people with bathing suits. Some are red, some are yellow, some are white, some are purple with red stripes. You're going to ask all these people, who are you guys? How come you're the only one with purple and red stripes and everybody else are, plain colors? They're like, we're from this city, Beersheba. That's where I am. We all shop at the same store. They're the only one who has it. Like, how interesting. Let me take your DNA. You're going to take their DNA. You're going to also sample the other bathing suits. Other bathing suits are from all over Israel, okay? We have only one Mediterranean Sea. Everybody are going there. They're going to come from everywhere. The people who are wearing the purple and red striped suit will be much more similar to each other than all the other ones, just because the cities in Beersheba are sort of organized by ethnicity, sort of. And then you're going to come up and say, hey, look, the orange and red stripes bathing suit wearers have all common origin. Some ancestors who probably invented this bathing suit. How exciting. This is exactly how the Levite study was done. And with the beach example, I was not exaggerating. They went to the beach and they sampled people with that surnames. They once again compare it to English. They saw that all the people with the Levite do not share the same DNA. They don't. Third of them did. They decided that those thirds must represent the Levite because they all share. That does not mean that. That means they all have some kind of common origin. Perhaps we can agree on that. But it does not mean they all have one Levite ancestor. What about the other ones? You have 66% of the people who do not match. But this majority of evidence was dismissed in favor of the much cooler and much small sample size, as things that happen, unfortunately, often in science. And then the whole Levite legend was born.
I'm white. Unseasoned. Caucasian.
Today, it is prohibited, and you can Google this, to do a DNA test in Israel. Totally forbidden. Wrong. It's illegal. It's a crime. You'll be jailed if you do a DNA test in Israel. Why?
So when did the Jewish community become a race? Let me ask that again. When did the Jewish community become a race? Is a Jew or Jewish a race? This is coming from a Jewish publication called The Forward, and this is an article they wrote back in 2017. The title of this article is, Can 23andMe tell us if Jews are a race? And is that a good thing? Written by Ari Feldman, and again, July 30th, 2017. And it reads, Can 23andMe tell us if Jews are a race, and is that a good thing? Learning your genetic makeup has never been easier than it is in 2017. For less than the cost of a doctor's visit, some people are trying to use the service to find out if or to what extent they're Jewish, a phenomenon that worries historians and scientists. buyers of mail-order gene testing kits do get solid information from them. They learn where their ancestors were living 9 generations ago. Some have even found living but long-lost family members. The danger, experts say, is that in relying on these kits to learn more about their genes, users are perpetrating the notion that Jews are a race, a concept they say has no scientific basis. So again, users are perpetrating the notion that Jews are a race, a concept they say has no scientific basis. Is this quote true? Let's confirm this by going to Anthropology Newsletter, The Origin of the Idea of Race by Audrey Smedley, who is a world-renowned anthropologist, November 1999. And it reads, contemporary scholars agree that race was a recent invention and that it was essentially a folk idea, not a product of scientific research and discovery. This is not new to anthropologists.
Then let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
It is. Well, they
No,
consider
it's
Jews
about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
But it's about white supremacy. It's
Well,
about
but
going
it's not-
after
it's
Jews
not about
and
ideal race.
gypsies
It's-
and
but these are two
Romans.
white groups of people.
So let's go back to the forward. Can 23andMe tell us if Jews are a race? And is that a good thing? It reads, the idea of race has historically slotted humans into a handful of categories: Asian, African, white, etc. But research has shown that there can be as much genetic differences within these races as between them. And experts say the notion that one skin tone and facial features alone can predict social behavior is plain wrong. It's really important for all of us to resist the attempt to revive this discredited notion that race is a biological category rather than a political and social category, said Marcy Darnovsky, director of the Center for Genetics and Society, a not-for-profit scientific ethics group. Now, these are some of the examples that this article posted of Ashkenazi Jews who used 23andMe to confirm their ethnicity, to confirm what race they belong to. This is a post by Jonathan Paul. Mine came back and basically told me I am extremely white, minus a bit of Ashkenazi Jewish heritage, which is kind of dope because Gal Gadot, and that's the actress who played Wonder Woman. And here's another example they used by Abigail Jaffe. It says, I am 98% Ashkenazi, says 23andMe, and 99.7% European. That is white. And someone responded to her from within the Ashkenazi community, posted this: I am Ashkenazi Jew, and I'm most definitely not a person of color. Never thought I'd have to clear that up, but then they post a link to blogs.timesofisrael.com, which is another Jewish publication. This article made an attempt to say that the Ashkenazi Jewish community, they are a people of color. And then they highlighted actors and actresses and famous people from within that community. They photoshopped, in other words, they toned down their appearance to make them appear to be people of color. I'll post a link inside the description box. So again, resist the attempt to revive this discredited notion that race is a biological category rather than a political and social category. So let's skip down to another part of this article. It reads, Ashkenazic Jews often find themselves in the peculiar situation of being 90% Ashkenazi Jewish and 99% European. Sephardic Jews may be told they are mostly Middle Eastern and North African and less than 10% Ashkenazic. Stuart Schaufman, a travel writer and blogger who writes under the name, and I'm not going to pronounce the full name because of the vulgarity, but Broke Blank Stewart. said he brought a kid from 23andMe because even though his family insists they're exclusively Jewish, he thought there was a possibility that he had some non-Jewish ancestry. I was curious because you never know, said Schaufman. Family stories are just stories. Schaufman, who learned that he is 99.8% Ashkenazi Jewish, said the test hasn't made much of a difference on his sense of Jewish identity. Judaism really informed who I am and my values and my worldview, Schaufman said. 23andMe hasn't made me more or less Jewy at all. I'm just Jewy.
Does having Jewish DNA determine your Jewish status? Great question. The answer is your Judaism is determined by your mother. If your mom's Jewish, you're Jewish according to traditional Judaism. Now, you could have a very high count of Jewish DNA, and that's awesome. That means you're connected to the Jewish people, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're Jewish. Don't forget, there are people that convert to Judaism and they have zero DNA and they're 100% Jewish.
Judaism really informed who I am and my values and my worldview, Schaufman said. 23andMe hasn't made me more or less Jewy at all. I'm just Jewy. However, Schaufman added he's Jewy and white, while other Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ethiopian Jews, can't claim that distinction. He's an ethnic minority, but a white one nonetheless. I get all the benefits of white privilege, he acknowledged. And again, this is why DNA testing is forbidden in Israel. This is why an assertive effort by the Israeli community to have 23andMe remove the Khazarian connection to the Ashkenazi Jews. They'll still show the map of the region, but they removed Khazarian from there. They'll still show the territory of Russia, Ukraine, Germany, minus the name Khazarian. And again, this is why the Negro, the Africans, were excluded from their testing and why it is forbidden to do DNA testing without court approval in Israel. So again, not a single Negro or African group was included in any of their testing. They were very selective of the Eurasian people groups they chose in an attempt to manipulate their expected output.
You'll be jailed if you do a DNA test in Israel. Why? Because they know the truth will come out. You come from Poland, you come from Ukraine, you came from Europe, you came from everywhere else.
So when you do this kind of comparison, it's important to be honest. And when you read those studies, you have to read them critically, because the easiest misconception to create and to falsify is to exclude the population that are the closest to the test population and include only about the population that you want to show. So for years and years, Ashkenazic Jews were compared to Palestinians and to English.
Right.
They came closer to the Palestinians, hence the connection to Israel. But those were just two people that are very different. And when you include populations like Italians and Caucasus people, Georgians, Armenians, Jews would be closer to Georgians and Armenians than to Palestinians. But these comparisons were not done. So this is what my study did for the first time. It shows, let's compare to Palestinian, let's compare to German, let's compare to those Caucasus populations, and these Caucasus and Italian population came up. Now, when some groups do compare to the Italians and they find the similarity, they dismiss it by saying, oh yeah, that was the Roman exile. And the point about the Italian, just to explain this, because it's not obvious, the similarity to Greco-Romans can be easily explained by their shared past with where we have now Turkey. Remember, Turkey was conquered by the Italian. They call it Constantinople. It was their capital city. So south to the Black Sea, there were always Greco-Romans and Iranians, all of them mixed. And these are the populations that their hybridization created the Ashkenazi Jewish genome. And because after they left this region, they avoided mixing with other populations to a certain degree, of course, they preserved this South Black Sea genetic signature that allowed us to come back after thousands of years and trace them back to where they were. If they were mixing with other populations, these Black Sea signatures would have decayed, it would have disappeared.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.
Hey guys, if you want to watch more clips, click here.
And if you want to watch the full podcast, click right here.